got to find some way that we can come to, like, some way to talk to each other again, and some way to become less radical. And I don't necessarily see a way out of where we are. And I don't know if you do as well.
No, the bridge building stuff, it's really, really important. But that's why, unfortunately, that's why I got testy when you said commies, because the Fox News and Associated Media Universe and the GOP itself is trying very hard to get people into this survivalist mentality, to think that they can't talk to the other side because they're just commies, they're pedophiles. And that's so dangerous, because you're right. We need bridge building. We have a lot in common, and there are forces pushing us apart. And I'm singling out Fox News and Tucker Carlson because he is a fascist demagogue. I will use the F word for him. He has mentioned great replacement theory, which is the fear that, whites are being extinguished by non-whites 400 times on his show. So that's like, boom, 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 indoctrinate people, make them scared of non-whites, make them scared of immigrants. So the latest thing will be commies, just watch. And so I will receive more hate mail. People will try and get me fired, because that's just my own micro universe. But that's just so that people will think they can't talk to me and I don't have anything to say to them. And instead, bridge building and speaking, agreeing to disagree, but being civil, that's democracy. And then be very suspicious of people who want to demonize other people, so that cuts off conversation.
I could not agree with you more. And I do get a sense, right? Like, I think that another major factor that we have is there's a giant divide between urban America, people that live in cities, and then like rural America. And I do feel like people that are, that are more rural, right? They feel like they don't have representation. And sometimes, like, in the state that I live in, there will be laws passed that aren't necessarily good for people that live in a rural place. And so it's easy for them to be, not necessarily be radicalized, I don't like that word, but to be more angry and not feel represented. And I don't know how we solve that. I feel like they do believe that their way of life is kind of under attack. And if you look at it from their perspective, it does seem that it is, right?
But that's why Trump was such a genius in coming to exactly those people and saying, you've been forgotten. No one has cared about you. And he consciously addressed himself to rural people. Mm-hmm. And that's why also the whole thing about the cities are burned out hellholes. And that's starting again. That's been starting again with Fox News. Mm-hmm. And you should see the number of hate mails I get, people judging me. They're like, oh, you teach at NYU, instead of NYU. Ooh. But the city, I'm in the city, so I must be this, I'm the commie, I'm the Jewish commie. And so, but the rural-urban divide is a big deal.
It is.
It's actually a big deal in many places where authoritarianism comes in.
Sorry.
So I was just going to say, that's a big failing of the Democratic Party, that it has not known most people. But John Fetterman, who won in Pennsylvania, he's an exception. He knows how to talk to people, and he knows he gets it. But Democrats have been a little too elitist, and they have not taken people's suffering seriously in rural places, and that has hurt them.
Most definitely. And another thing, like from my point of view, I definitely have leanings that are definitely towards the right, but I love that you pointed out a flaw, right? I'm sympathetic. I'm more of a rural person, right? I have a rural background. But I do think it's correct too, and I don't trust any mainstream media, but it is funny how even I was a bit susceptible, right? I used communist. Like I used a kind of a buzzword. In speaking with Ford Fisher, I said extremist at one point, and he said, "No, I like to use the word activist because extremist has a negative connotation. I want to understand these people." So thanks for pointing that out. And I also appreciate when you're very careful to throw around the F word. I think that's also a big problem, is throwing a Nazi, any of that around too much. It takes power away from it, and it's hard for me, who's trying to discern truth. It's really hard for me to listen. It's like you cry wolf too many times, and that's a very serious connotation. And that, to me, if you're either one of those things, I don't like you, and I don't know if I can change your mind. I think it might be too late for me to try and change your mind. And so I think the work that you're doing is very important, and it's very valuable. And I love that you want to build bridges. I think that we've got to do that, because I have friends. We engage in political discussions from time to time, and some of them do think that maybe in our lifetimes we might see some sort of conflict or something arise because we can't figure out how to talk to each other. And I'm wondering, do you get that same sense, or do you think that that's something that we're just being paranoid about?
No, I mean, definitely there's an uptick in political violence. Look at what happened to Nancy Pelosi's husband. They were looking for her. It was that was like an extension of January 6th. And we had January 6th. I mean, people are like, they still haven't even digested January 6th. It's unbelievable. I had to look at pictures of it today, and every time I feel sick to my stomach. I just can't. And I study this stuff, and I just can't even with January 6th. And so this is why I'm so worried about this demonization by Republicans of Democrats, saying they're pedophiles, they're commies, they're this, because that leads people to be seen as people you have to use violence against. That's the problem. And when you stop talking, you start shooting. And then the big wild card in our country, which other countries don't have, is 400 million guns in private hands. And so that's and this is not a discussion about whether you think somebody should have, my dad kept a handgun at home. He's ex-military. And so, but this is about assault weapons availability when you're in a situation of extreme polarization. Then you're going to get more buffaloes. Somebody, influenced by radical right extremist racism and goes and shoots up African-American supermarket. You're going to get more and more of those things, because that's the unpredictable part versus the history of such situations.
Yes. Yeah. I think that potentially you and I might have polar opposite views on that, and that's okay. But
yeah, that's okay.
It is okay.
But let's take out the gun part. And when in the history of political violence, what demagogues have done before to get people in a situation to do harm to their neighbors or to groups of people who have the wrong religion or skin color, or whatever, is you have to do this demonization. So we can leave out the guns because it could be stabbings, it could whatever the heck they're doing. All right, but you've got to have this mass demonization of an enemy. And in military dictatorships, I write about in my book, it was commies. Anybody left, socialists or just as long whatever left thing you were commie, and you had to be exterminated or locked up or tortured. Obviously, for fascists, it was Jews as well as commies. So that I watch very carefully signs by people like Tucker Carlson of trying to get Americans in a mood to just see people in one way. and think that the only way to deal with those people is violence. That's what I'm tracking.
It's a good thing. It's a good thing to track. When you
Scary.
it is scary. I do have a question for you, right? Like at the end of the day, do you trust the institution of our government? Like where like I kind of want to get a sense of how you feel about that.
I do. I think it's very important to now. I mean, it depends what government is there. If you have a demagogue in power, when Trump was in power, I did not trust him. Obviously, I know that, for example, there were government agencies that had a lot of honest people in them, and then there were a lot of Trump appointees that were terribly corrupt or violent or whatever. But I think what we can say historically is when people lose faith and trust in all the institutions, including media, that is when it becomes difficult to sustain democracy. Because if you have no faith that the government is on your side at all in any way, whether it's local government or your town or the federal government, you're more likely to be seduced by an anti-government person, like, because Trump, of course, he became the president, but at the beginning, he's the outlaw. He's the rogue. In fact, he called his campaign a movement at the beginning. And so you're also more likely to have such a hatred that you are willing to assault the Capitol and kill Capitol Police. Because you want to overthrow the government because you hate it so much. And there's a lot of anti-government extremists in our country too. There's that. Yeah. So that's, if you don't have any trust, who do you trust? You trust your tribe. And sometimes your tribe are people who you only want to, they only think the same things you do. And that's why also QAnon is catching on, like, it's huge now. And other conspiracy theories. So that's the problem with that.
I would agree. I would definitely agree.